Hey, so I've got my dog eating bones behind me, but I just want to do a quick video response to Nathan's last video posting, which he talks about looking at the overall arc. And first of all, I want to make clear that I'm not criticising or judging or arguing with Nathan. I just want to shine a different light on the issues that he's talking about, because it's one of the things that's clear from a lot of Nathan's posts that he has a very different view of what yoga is from myself, and maybe by responding I can clarify that difference and clarify because he said himself that he was taking the yoga out of it, and I just want to reflect on what the yoga is, because I think there's a real Western tendency coming out in that latest video, which is to really look at the goals, look ahead, and to focus on what can be achieved. And the achievement in yoga leads us to look at secondary outcomes, and it's not the fundamental central purpose of why we do it. And I can really crystallize this because he uses the analogy of travel, and he says, oh, you can get to Boston in 6 hours, and we all know the cliche, and I'm just going to bring it to the forefront of our minds. Sorry, it's real late here. To the forefront of our minds, which is that the purpose of travel is not the destination, it's to live the experience of that travel. So this is the difference in our approaches, and I'm not saying one's right, one's wrong. I maybe am saying one is yoga. And I'd also raise the same analogy because he talked about, he's really focused on this idea of the tennis and what's the purpose of that, and moving from focusing on the technique and how you're moving to the game, and there's value in that. But I would ask the question from a yoga point of view, what is the purpose of that game? And it's all right if the purpose of that is competing, if it's winning, if it's releasing all these neurochemicals, if it's getting that, I would say, fleeting utility from tennis. From a yoga perspective, we don't actually ever want to lose that focus on the real detail of the experience of the movements and to live the experience. And that's why, as opposed to something like tennis or basketball or even martial arts to a certain extent, yoga is a practice, and the idea of a practice is that we don't lose that intensive focus. And I guess the closest thing from Nathan's worldview, if I may be so bold as to assume that, is that the purpose is to get into that state of flow. And in yoga philosophy and my personal experience, we go a long way beyond that. But the idea is that by focusing on practice, focusing on a microcosm, it doesn't matter what the practice is. It can be your golf swing, it can be this asana or that asana or a squat or whatever. The idea is not to perfect the movement itself or perfect that posture. The idea is to perfect our engagement by working on our engagement, working on our presence, because you also talked about getting good at something, and I think there is no good and bad in yoga philosophy. There's only the idea of being present, and we practice that in microcosm so that it then comes into the rest of our lives. And there's so many people that have had that experience now that I don't feel that I need to justify that. It's not theoretical, it's very real. And we see this differentiation in approaches in this really fad, maybe it's an ex-fad now, I don't know, of mindfulness, where there's a Western approach of you do a course and then suddenly you're mindful in your life, and there's the Eastern approach that is is thousands and thousands of years old, where you practice a particular practice, and by focusing on that practice and engaging in that practice and repeating that practice, we keep hold of a focus on the detail. What is the difference that a small shift in posture, a small shift in where I'm doing the work make to the overall experience, and by focusing that in microcosm, we bring that into the rest of our life. So, you know, if you want an explanation of the overall arc, that's great. If you want to focus on the secondary effects, that's great as well. But the yoga is in this connection to the fundamental reality, by putting aside achievement, by putting aside secondary effects, and just really engaging with your practice. So I hope that creates another dynamic in that same discussion. All right, good work, Nathan.